Always good to see you. Okay, so let's talk about offers and gathering those terms, and then how you go about filling out the forms for it, and then competing in kind of a little bit in that multiple offer situation. So I'm going to keep it kind of very generic. This is a template that I would use when I was in a multiple offer situation, and yet I thought it was a good way because to kind of help you gather what terms you're going to need to gather from your buyer to make an offer. You don't have to have it in a spreadsheet. You guys know that I love my templates and like being all super formal. If you want me to be completely honest, as a agent, oftentimes it's going to be in a notebook. But I think you want to get used to having where you're going to take down some of these things consistently so that A, you remember what to ask people when you're getting ready to write an offer, and that you've got all the information for when you get back to the office or back home and you're going to fill out the offer paperwork. So typically I would start at the top of that piece of paper with purchase price. And what is the purchase price that they want to have, that they want to do? Let's go back and we're going to use our example that we had earlier. Oh, we've got a couple of people in the chat. Let me make sure. Okay, excellent. So we're going to go back to our example here of that 525 house, right? And so I'm talking with my clients, and it is somewhat of where you've done your comps and you're saying, okay, it's listed at 525. You've made your phone call to the listing agent and they're kind of giving you hints at where they are. We've talked a little bit before about when you're calling that listing agent and you say, okay, it's listed at 525. Oh, you already have, this has been on the market 5 days. So you might very well be calling, do you have anything working? And asking some of those questions of, do you have any offers in hand yet? Sometimes it'll give away. The agent will be like, nope, got a lot of showings, but nobody stepped forward and made an offer, which may very well be them saying that like it's overpriced, right? And you've done your homework. 1,700 square feet might be overpriced. Well, it is, and it is Brookside, and and yet you're going to get that information. So let's say that in talking to your clients, you may very well say, okay, what do we want our purchase price to be? So let's go with our example of we're going to make our offer for 525,000. We are going to do, or I'm sorry, let's say 550.
Yeah.
It's been on the market for 5 days. Maybe they did a price adjustment. Let's see. Nope, they started at 525. I would probably recommend if it's been on the market for 5 days that we don't go in above ask like that, right? We're calling and asking the questions to the listing agent, then we're coming back to our client. So maybe we say we're going to do an offer of 520 because they don't have anything working on it. The listing agent's kind of hinting that she thinks it might be a little bit overpriced. And then the next thing that I often would write down is seller paid closing costs. Again, in this market, a lot of times when we're competing, we're going to have our clients pay their own closing costs. And we're going to take a moment here to explain to them why that's important. We talked a little bit about that before, that it's going to make it a smoother offer. It's more competitive because the net is going to be higher to the seller. And so we're going to put 0 for closing costs. But the reason that I put on here that we're going to talk about closing costs is that you're remembering to slow down and ask your client. Just to clarify, once again, you're paying your own closing costs, correct? The next thing would be home warranty. And I would say everyone has their own beliefs on home warranties and the value in them and whatnot, but it's a field on the contract that you want to make sure that you're addressing so you have that information to fill out the contract when you get back to the office. And the way I would handle it is just explain what a home warranty is. So a home warranty typically is going to be in that $500 range so that you can ask for the seller to pay for it on your behalf. You as a buyer can pay for a home warranty yourself too, so it doesn't have to be paid by the seller. Note, it is another ask, and it's going to be something where if nobody else asks for a home warranty, we might make our offer less desirable. It is going to come out of the net for a seller. So if I were to put 500 here for a home warranty, it's dropping the net down to 519, 500. Now, again, like we did last week with our math, we could always just increase our offer to cover that, right? To say, okay, 5,200. 520, 500, so that we're going to net them what we want. But if your clients are in a position that they can pay for that themselves, it might be something to keep your offer cleaner and just leave it out of there, okay? And it's something that you do need to have a conversation about because you don't want to get to 4 weeks after closing and they call and say, why didn't you offer me to get a home warranty? Now my dishwasher went out. I'm super upset because my coworker said that we could have gotten a home warranty. So we're wanting to make sure that we're asking that question. The next term that I would say, and the reason I put those 3 in that order is because it's going to affect the net to the seller. We're going to talk about additional terms. So if there's ever a time that there's an additional term in there, like a new roof or painting or something of that sort. Might want it, can Mo, you grab a chair out there. You're fine. This one's broken, so I don't want you sitting in it. You're going to put anything that's going to affect the value. So if it's that you're asking them that they replace carpet or anything above that line, so you know what your net is to the seller. Earnest deposit's the next term that you're going to want to gather. Typically, it's going to be 1% or greater. Randy's always going to try to and encourage you. Our broker's always going to encourage you that you keep it below the small claims court amount for earnest money, just because if there's ever a fight over it, your client doesn't have to get attorneys involved and such. So we might very well say, okay, we're going to do an earnest. It's different in the 2 states. And I want to say that in Missouri, it's 4,000. And then in Kansas, but I don't know. That's a good Randy question. I'm 90% sure, but let's ask Randy and find out for sure. One of the things you can do with your earnest deposit too, guys, if you want to be aggressive with your offer and show that your buyers are really serious, is you could say initially, we're going to put down an earnest of 5,000. And then after inspections, my client's willing to put down another 5,000. That way, they don't have a whole lot of money on the line until they know for sure that they want to buy the property and it's not tied up. Because it's there to show good faith. And not someone's going to say, okay, what about earnest? It's there to show good faith. And so that your clients have money tied up on it to say, like, I'm serious. I'm not going to just come do inspections on your house and tie it up from other buyers getting it without having some skin in the game. And yet a seller can be difficult. And even if they are supposed to sign the paperwork and release it, sometimes they won't. And so it's something to consider there. Okay, next term is closing date. We've talked before that this is a question that you want to clarify if you can get a hold of the seller or look for in the notes in the MLS for the property. So remember when we looked before, guys, a lot of times that's going to be listed here under agent showing, private remarks showing agent info. Seller prefers a closing date of March 17th. Does that make sense? So we're going to say March 17th for a closing date. If we weren't given one, right? We're going to go with a 30-day. We're going to call and ask the listing. It'd be totally acceptable for you to say, do they have a desirable closing date? Oh, my seller would really prefer more like 60 days. Okay, awesome. Is like, does this date work? If you can get a date out of them, that would be best. But does that make sense on closing date? Simple enough. Okay, so then possession. The reason why we have a separate line for possession is typically the contract's going to read 5 o'clock the day of closing, unless something else is specified and all funds have and that loan has funded. The reason I'm pointing out possession date is sometimes it can be desirable for a seller to hold possession after closing. And then also if you're working in the best interest of a buyer and we're looking at a vacant property, or we're looking at a property that listing agent said, well, they're going to move into their new house at the end of February. So really they're good with whatever. You could do a 30-day close. Well, I want to set expectations because, people move into their new house and they leave the last bit of everything, right? But I want to set expectations of a time. And so sometimes I might say 3/17 at 1 p.m. And the reason I'm saying that is as long as I schedule my client's closing date for the morning, then it should be funded by 1 o'clock and the sellers know that we're taking the keys at 1 o'clock. Sometimes people you're gonna see on offers, and some people will just put on here that does that make sense, guys? Yep. We're setting expectations. I wouldn't put necessarily 9 o'clock on the 17th because then you're setting poor expectations for your client, because chances of them being able to close on the 17th and fund by 9 a.m. is pretty rare. Okay. Sometimes people are going to put on here like at funding. And you're going to see where the term's going to say at funding or at closing. I would be leery of that because it's not a clear expectation. If the other listing agent isn't making it clear to their clients that it's at funding, and all of a sudden your people have got a truck in the driveway, they're ready to move in at 1 o'clock, And the sellers are going, well, we didn't have our money. We didn't know. It's always best if you can set some expectations. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
The other thing is that this is a term that you can be competitive at. If this seller, and you're talking to the listing agent, wants to hold possession for 2 days afterwards, note it's a risk for your buyer to leave possession in the seller's hands after closing, because A, they may not get everything out like they're supposed to. B, they may not clean up like they're supposed to. And C, there's a chance that something could happen and the property be damaged. I kid you not, it was not a fun story, really, really wonderful clients. But I got a phone call of, oh, well, the washing machine from the second floor leaked into the living room and the ceiling is destroyed and the hardwood floors in the living room. And it was in that window between when the sellers closed and held possession and my buyers took possession. And it was a really hard phone call to make, to say, hey guys, you guys take possession in about 4 hours, and I'm so sorry, but we've got, like, they're going to take, the sellers are great. They've already called the insurance company. Insurance is going to pay for it, but now your buyers are dealing with a busted, ceiling and living room kind of thing. I mean, that stuff can happen too, right? And it's not that it wouldn't be where the sellers are responsible. It's just a harder thing to, to coordinate, because sellers are the ones, insurance company, but the buyer is the one that kind of is dealing with it.
But could it have been that they could have not been responsible because they had already closed?
It gets hairy, right? Where you got less leverage to make them do anything, right? When they're like, well, I mean, we'll make a phone call, we'll see what we can do, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But technically, yes. And if you're going to do anything like that, where you're going to say, okay, we're going to let them hold possession again, we're going to say a specific time, people. So we're going to say maybe 10 a.m. on the 19th. Because we want to set expectations. You need to make sure that your client has insurance on the property.
Can I ask a question?
Insurance, yes.
A question on a closing date. Is it ever a competitive, like, let's say the clients are going to go into a new home, or maybe they haven't found a home yet. Is it ever advantageous if, let's say, your buyer can go wait further along to say, possession date can go 60 days. I know I'm not saying it right, but like, is it always typical that, or does a seller really dictate that? Or is that something that as an agent, you can ask the other agent, or what?
It's 100% one of the questions you should be asking the other agent. So like, you are definitely, when your client wants to make an offer, you're picking up the phone and you're calling the other agent and saying,
Okay.
let's talk to me a little bit. Do you have other offers in hand? Are you reviewing offers at any certain time? Are there things that are important to the sellers?
Okay.
Yes, they really would like to sell it as is. They're going to give you those kinds of clues. And then you're going to say, is there an ideal closing date for your client, for your seller? Some agents are going to say, oh no, they're good whenever, which is so frustrating. And as a listing agent, I'm going to coach you through, have a date in place. That way you just clear that field, and anyone that can meet that ideal date, great. And it makes it a lot simpler. But sometimes they are going to say, well, they're flexible, just, right, whatever, they're flexible, right? And it's a little more difficult. But if they want a 60-day close, or if they want a 90-day close, the listing agent's going to tell you. Ideally, they really like 90 days because they still have to find something, or their house, they're doing new construction and we're not exactly sure when that's going to be done. So they'd like 90 days. You're going to have some people that would say they need to find something, Elizabeth. So if you could write it for 90 days, but talk to me, how flexible are your buyers? If we end up finding something, would they be willing to move your closing date up? And you can say, yeah, no, my people are 100. I mean, especially in this competitive market. My buyers are super flexible. They'd give them 90 days and they'd also close it in 30 if you guys wanted, and we'll be prepared. We'll get our ducks in a row to where we can close a lot faster if that helps you guys.
Yeah, but she used the word possession. So usually you would not have a close date in a possession that is something like 60 or 90 days. You would want to move the closing.
Not necessarily. And that stuff is happening, guys. And when you're losing out to other people, that might be what's going on. And that's a question.
And don't take possession until 2 months later?
People are making that term. People are offering that term because it gives the reason that that's beneficial is if you call that listing agent and they say, well, gosh, they really need to find something. They want 90 days to try to find something. Okay, so tell me a little bit more. Does your seller are they contingent on this one? Is that going to make it easier? But if they want to find more, or tell me a little bit more about their situation. Would it be beneficial? Oh, you've got 27 offers. Oh, you've got 27 offers. when I don't have any offers, well, you we're not doing the crazy stuff. You've got 27 offers. Okay, great. Well, let's talk a little bit. Would it be helpful if your clients were able to close on the property on the 17th of March and we let them hold possession until May 1st? Would that give them more buying power, or would that give them the more confidence? And there are people that are doing that. Do it very carefully. Your people are going to be banking a mortgage, paying that interest and principal and, interest during that time. But guys, I kid you not, there are agents out there that are writing where people get to rent back and pay money or live there for free for 2 months or 6
Okay.
months. And it's how they're winning properties.
Okay.
So those are the questions that you want to ask.
And that's in the contract, close date, possession date. I know from experience that there is an amendment that I did not use, something about
Possession, yep.
If it's in the contract, do you need that amendment? Or what does that amendment come in and help your buyers?
It is there to protect your buyers, to say who's holding insurance and personal property, who's paying for the utilities, and then who's paying if there's any money exchanged for that time. So if you're going to give an offer of like the 17th, which guys, it's not often that you do it, but there are certain circumstances when you say what's important to the sellers. Well, it would be really nice if they could close and hold possession for, oh, okay, well, this is a special okay, I'm hearing you. Let's talk more about this. But you could close on March 17th and give them possession through May 17th and say, but we'll have them rent it back to us for $1,200 a month. And you're going to write that on that possession prior or after closing addendum.
Okay.
So it is where it's something to pay attention to, and it is a term. And a lot of times agents are going to say, no, they could close same day, or they want to hold possession. And it's a way to differentiate yourself. Some agents you're going to know on the other end where they're going to go, what are you talking about? Like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe that would be helpful. And sometimes you have to be the best agent in the transaction and ask those questions. Tell me more about your people. Oh yeah, we already found them a house. They're closing on the 17th. That's why they want to close on the 17th. Oh, that's great that they're closing on the 17th. Would it be helpful for them to hold on possession through, maybe on like Sunday of that weekend? And the other agent would go, what do you mean? Oh yeah, I guess, oh yeah, it would maybe be helpful, right? So like, if you hear that they don't have that knowledge of the fact that it might be beneficial, it's a way to set yourself apart. Okay, inspection period. Your inspection period is going to be 10 days unless specified elsewhere, and you want to explain that to your client. You can, again, differentiate yourself by shortening that inspection period to be 7 days or 5 days. What I would highly recommend is that you're in communication with an inspector to make sure that they've got time to get you on the calendar. That's why it's so important that you're building relationships with those vendors, because I'll tell you, that was one of the key things, is having vendors that I could call them and say, hey, I'm getting ready to write on something and I need to be competitive. What do you have available early next week? Oh, you've got something on Monday, so I know I can get my inspections done within a 5-day or 6-day period. Tentatively put me down. I'll text you. I should know later tonight if I got the house or not, and I'll let you know whether or not to hold that position for me. But your inspection period is going to be 10 unless it's specified elsewise. Your renegotiation period is going to be 5 days unless you specify a different time. When I was being competitive, guys, often my jam, and a lot of agents will say this, is I would often shorten this to 7 days and this to 3 days. And I would say, our inspection period is 7 days. I'm going to try to get it done sooner than that. The renegotiation period I have is 3 days. So we're going to tell you a yes or no on whether we're moving forward or not before your other person's even out of the get out of free jail card. Because an inspection period, you can cancel for any reason, guys, and you do not have to tell the seller why. You just have to do a professional inspection.
And you have to do it within those 7 or 10 days.
You have to do it within that inspection period. So by 11:59 at the end of that inspection period, you've got to complete your inspections and notify them.
If you are getting them in its present condition and marking what's now box 1, used to be box 2, the renegotiation period doesn't matter, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, correct. So if you do, that is a great question. Thank you, thank you. If you are going to go as is and check box 1 and say that your buyers are going to do inspections and yet they're not going to renegotiate, then you wouldn't have a renegotiation period.
And would you put 0? Because it's going to say 5 days unless other, would you put 0?
I would put 0 to make it clear. And if you were a listing agent, I would clarify that too, but I would put 0 to make it clear. I have on here, if anyone, and that you have the opportunity, and if anyone's gonna say, if your client's gonna sign up to do an as-is addendum. And then I would make note of like box 1, if they're gonna do box 1 or box 2. You need to gather their lender. So if you don't already know who their lender is, you wanna gather that information. And again, I'm gonna just use one.
And you need to approve the letter. Oh, yeah, you've got that.
Yep. So the loan type, you also are gonna need that information. So if they're like going between how much down they wanted to do and what loan type, you should know conventional. Let's say 10% down. Appraisal requirements. So this is where if you wanted to do an appraisal waiver, you could make note and have a conversation about that. Again, if there's not multiple offers on the the property and it's not that there's any in sight, I wouldn't go all in and get super duper aggressive right off the bat. But let's say maybe they're willing to do a $5,000 appraisal waiver. Okay, our additional considerations, that would be if there was any repairs you're gonna ask. Again, I know that that's gonna be only certain circumstances these days, although Randy just shared, and he shared this morning in Overland Park, 125 houses expired. I mean, there are houses out there that are not selling, guys. This one that's been on the market for 5 days, guaranteed it's overpriced. Guaranteed that that listing agent and that seller might very well be going, why isn't it sold? Why isn't it sold? Why isn't it sold? And you might have a little bit more of, oh, the roof is super ancient on it. Let's talk about that. Like, how do we get creative kind of a thing? But the other thing is inclusion. So you're going to be looking at your seller's disclosure. And if the refrigerator is not staying and your client really wants the refrigerator to stay, you're going to make note of that. If there is a trampoline in the backyard or a swing set that's falling apart that you want to make sure is removed, you're going to note that in the additional, you're going to take note of that here, and I'll show you on the contract where we'll make note of, or we'll include that. Okay. And then we have our expiration of the offer for you to add when that would be. So let's say we want them to include the fridge. How about old tires? Again, I will tell you, if you want your offer to be competitive, have the conversation with your clients of, are you wanting to lose this house over old tires that are in the back? If we've got where we're competing against 4 others, maybe we just suck it up and remove the old tires ourselves. But all of that stuff needs to be specified. And then we're going to do an expiration of 2/16/2022. And again, guys, oftentimes for me, this is just scribbled out on a piece of paper, not formatted nice and neat in an Excel spreadsheet. I'm just doing this to try to make it towards easy for us to go through together.
And old tires, would that would have to have been in the seller's disclosure that they're keeping old.
No, I mean, like, be aware, like the property I bought recently had cinder blocks in the attic. I mean, if you don't say it, I mean, there's stuff like that, like it's in the attic. Like if I don't call it out, it's a good chance the cinder blocks are gonna be in the attic when we close. Right. It was an investment property, so they were that. No, I did not. But I knew too that I was gonna have some, cinder blocks and other stuff, kind of a thing. So any questions kind of on gathering what the different terms are? Okay. So let's look at filling out that DocuSign. So we're going to go into your commands and look up your buyer again, right? So I've gone in and looked up Eddie. You guys want me to go back to show you where? One thing I would say is, let me show you a different route, because there's sometimes it's kind of fun. You're going to get lots of buyers. Super excited about. You can go in here to opportunities on the left, and then it's going to bring up it looking like this. And you're going to be like, Elizabeth, this does not look easier. What are you talking about? At the top, click on the one that says all opportunities for you guys, and it's going to bring up all your opportunities, and it'll be easier for you to see what you're looking at. Okay. So I believe I have it set up to where Eddie here. I know I have an address in here, so let me remove that just so it doesn't mess anything up. He didn't buy it. He didn't want to buy that one. Oh no. Okay. Look at me just clicking away. Oh, now it's going to say it wants it. All right, that's fine. Just kidding. So I've got it over in DocuSign. You're going to click through to your documents. And then we're gonna say go to transaction. And it'll open it up in DocuSign for you. You can either sign directly into DocuSign as well if you'd like. If you haven't done so already, you've got your Missouri disclosure brokerage form in which you're gonna just, they read through and they need to initial or sign at the bottom. Okay, and we're gonna go through DocuSign on Thursday where we're gonna show you how to add those signatures and assign it to people, okay? We also have one so this is MREC. Do you mean to zoom in?
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
You're good. MREC, and then, or I'm sorry, you have one for Missouri, and then you also have one for Kansas, and both of those will just review an initial, and we'll talk about that. Affiliated business disclosure, there's a signature on the bottom of that they'll fill out. And then our buyer agency. We're gonna click on that buyer agency, and you hopefully have already got this taken care of long before you started showing Eddie houses. And yet, if not, you're getting ready to write the offer, you're gonna fill it out at that time. You do need to put his marital status on here. So a single person, ASP, AMP for a married person. I've talked to some of you and you've got where you're like, I'm writing up a contract and it's got father, son on it. So it may very well be a single person, comma, son, and then a single person, comma, father, so that title knows what the relationship is between those two buyers. Does that make sense?
And it takes one to buy but two to sell. So you could have a married person and not have the second person in the couple.
Correct. Yep. And then general location, greater metropolitan area, Kansas City metropolitan area works for your general location, and that's going to cover you
If you're licensed in both states.
if you're licensed in both states and in overall in Kansas and Missouri of the general area. Okay. I wouldn't get to where you're going too much more general than that because it can get to where it's too general and it's not going to hold up. The purpose of this buyer agency is that if someone signs it and then they go buy a property in the general metropolitan area, that they're going to give you commission even if they do it without you. In the past, if I knew someone was specifically buying in the Jackson County area, I might put Jackson County or Johnson County because it was close in. Then you're going to have your start time. So you're going to say it begins on February 15th, 2022, and then ends on typically your 6 months is what I always defaulted in. And so you're going to put on here, let's do here. Let's say we're going to look in Jackson County because I know my people are not going anywhere else than Jackson County. And then here I'm going to say 2/15. 2020 or 2022. And then if I'm adding 6 months to it, then we're going to go through August 15th of 2022. Next, you're going to say your price range. I do often will put like a 0 there just to be clear. And then we're going to say they've been a pre-approved and are going up to 600. We're going to check residential. And then continue to scroll down. The rest of this is all standards. And I would encourage you to be able to review the contract. I'm not going to read it through with you right now. I want to help you with filling in the blanks if that's okay. Have you guys reviewed the contract? Okay.
But if they, if let's say they bought a house for 602, and we got
So
the
sorry.
303, do you have to go back and change this?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you need to modify and there's a change form for it. So the question was if they end up buying something for 602. So let's say that these people went and found a for sale by owner next weekend and they bought a house for $602,000 from a for sale by owner. Too bad, so sad. They were in the clear. So,
But if they buy it from you and you're representing them, is it really necessary to change this?
Yes.
Okay.
because it's like that, yes, that would compliance is gonna match things up and say, oh, no, you need to change this.
Okay.
Same thing with your date. So let's say that you guys are helping these guys helping them, and they finally find a house. It's set to close August 20th. You have to go in and amend the buyer agency agreement to extend to the 20th of August.
And
So that
that's
it's
not a
gonna
change
close.
form, that's an amendment.
No, it's a change, and
Oh,
it's a
okay,
change
form,
form.
okay.
Yep. Okay, so this is saying what Keller Williams Plaza, what we're committing to do for them. And then next is the compensation piece, right? And I know that this is one that everyone gets a little anxious around talking about. You're gonna put in here 3. Sometimes people will put it in like this. To make it clear, 3% of the purchase price, and then your flat fee of $395 goes here. And again, guys, the commission, which is typically paid for by the seller, is a 3% of the purchase price. And then there is a $395 flat fee that'll be included in your closing costs that you'll be responsible for. If there any reason the seller's not paying closing costs, it's a for sale by owner, we can kind of cross that bridge. Typically, we can roll it up into the purchase price, but we can cross that bridge when we get there. Is how we kind of roll through that. This is what the buyer is representing and agreeing to do to us, Keller Williams. Then we go into typical inspections. Randy has incorporated this into our buyer agency now. So it's just saying these are the typical inspections that a client should do. And it's covering your backside to say that you notified them that there's inspections that they should be doing on a property. So if they decide to do as is box 3, wow, by golly, you've said what you needed to say that they should be doing inspections. This is going over the different brokerage relationships. So designated agency in Kansas and Missouri, designated, which is what you're going to be as a designated buyer's agent, a transaction broker. I had a great question the other day where someone said, okay, what happens if I list a property and then somebody comes in and they want to buy it? And then I become a transaction broker, right? No. The only time you become a transaction broker is if you've got signed exclusive right to sell with a client and one of your exclusive right to sell buyers also wants to buy that same property. Otherwise, if a stranger off the street wants to come buy your listing, you're going to be a designated listing agent, and then you're going to have them sign the contract stating that they're understand they're unrepresented and that you are designated. And I'll show you on the contract in just a second where we're going to designate that. Does that make sense? This is going over TILA RESPA TRID, just saying that there are specific guidelines in line about how long disclosures have to be out to a buyer. So that's covering that piece of things. Most of the time when you're going through a contract, you don't have to necessarily read it line for line. I would encourage you to attach it as a PDF so your clients can read it if they'd like. But going through it at a high level like this is often what most people were okay with. They understand that it's boilerplate. It's not like you're going to get to cross out and redline something, but just kind of going through overall. This is a franchise disclosure that each office is independently owned and operated. This is talking about how you're disclosing to them their home warranty companies that they could choose from. This is an arbitration agreement that if for some reason a dispute were to arise, you'd be agreeing to go to arbitration. Oh, look at that. And then this is going over just a new term, a jury trial and class action waiver. This is an important one that they've rolled up in here too. So anti-fraud, this is talking about how not to wire money to somebody that you get an email from to contact us, that there are people out there that are trying to commit fraud. So please be aware, and it's just them notifying them of that. Okay, we see you've got additional terms and conditions, if any. If your buyer were to say, well, if I end up buying my brother's house or if I want to end up buying my coworker's house, they said that it might be possible for me to buy their house. I don't know if it's going to work out or not. I don't want to have to pay you, Krista, on that one because I talked to my coworker already about it. Like, I don't think that's fair. You would put in here that you're excluding that specific property address. Okay. You may also have where client, I always would say when I did that start and finish time of the buyer agency, and I would often say, y'all, I like to work with people that like to work with me. So if at any time you feel uncomfortable and no longer want to work with me, I'm more than happy to cancel this agreement and release you from it. Some people that was more enough and they had trusted me. Other people might want to have in here that this could be canceled by either party, kind of a thing with notice or something if you needed to include something like that. I would avoid that as much as possible just so that you are protected. But there was never a time that I didn't want to be more than happy to like fire myself if somebody was difficult to work with and not respectful. Okay, so then here at the last page of it, you're gonna sign, the buyer's gonna sign, which will handle how to address that on Thursday in DocuSign. And then the last field is you want to be a designated agent here. State of Missouri is where it's important because in the state of Missouri, they've got to designate who the agent is. So I'm designated here as a listing agent. Note that if you've got anyone else helping you with a transaction, technically they need to be listed here as a designated agent. Okay, does that make sense? So if you kind of often will work with somebody else and they're going to show, or this buyer's you're getting ready to go out of town for 2 weeks because you get to finally go on this great vacation, you would want to add that other agent that's going to be helping your client while you're gone to the exclusive buyer agency. Does that make sense?
But it's not saying that they get a certain percentage or certain, you figure that out with that person on your own.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Now note yes, correct. Yep. Okay, so then let's go to everybody okay with buyer agency? Okay, so exclusive right to sell is the contract. I wanted to show you guys too on this particular property, when we go under the view documents, this one has 3 documents that are listed. Okay, these are great clues on how to handle this listing of this property and how to fill out paperwork. Okay, so one of the things that you'll see sometimes is offer instructions. So you're always going to want to click on that and understand what that says. This says offer instructions, please send the offer to this person. Here's the seller's name, and they've got on here a single person. Otherwise, you're pulling it off the seller's disclosure. They've got their listing office information, which is helpful because you're going to put that on the last page of the offer. And then they have their title company, which we're going to use for the earnest money. Sometimes there'll be other legal description people will include, but that's typically the offer cover sheet kind of that you're going to find. Sound good?
Yeah, and I noticed lately I see some that says send offer through .loop. Well, we can do that now. So they have to accept our offer.
Correct.
And they have to present it to their client, right? I can send it to them PDF.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. No, and I would say, I would take into consideration, you have free .loop accounts through KCRER. If it's something where you're like, how am I going to be competitive? I don't want this to be a strike against my client. Extract it out as one PDF from DocuSign, upload it to .loop, and send it over to them via .loop. If you want to be nice, go ahead and add where they've got the initial spots for them or whatnot, so that it's easy on their client. I mean, part of you as a buyer's agent, guys, to make it as easy as possible to work with me as for the listing agent, right? And there are going to be some that are going to want you to like do all kinds of different specifics and such, but that would be, Krista, listen, depending on the situation, I would think about, what I mean? If they're pretty adamant that it needs to be in there,
Okay.
kind of a thing. Otherwise, you're going to have seller's disclosure and then lead-based paint on this one. And so you're going to download those to your computer, and then you're able to upload those here by saying add document from your computer. Okay. And we'll again talk more about that on Thursday. So let's go into the residential real estate contract. I just wanted to clarify before we got started, because that should be a pre-step to filling out paperwork, that those are the documents that we would want to include. You may sometimes see here under the additional documents that they've got a franchise disclosure, because they're at a RE/MAX office, and each RE/MAX office has a franchise disclosure that needs to be signed. Or there's an as-is addendum, and I'll show you again where we're going to notate all that. So here we're going to put our seller's name. And if we're going back, our seller's name is Andrew, a single person. We already have Eddie, and he's not an Edward, he's an Eddie. His parents just did that to him. You've got your street address that you're going to enter. Do you guys want me to populate everything here, or is it okay if we skip through for time's sake? Yep. Okay. So then legal description, guys, we're going to either pull that off of where we did our 365. Remember how we said that we could come find that legal description right here under tax information. So you can copy and paste that over into legal description. This is stating everything that's attached. These are all the things that are staying with the property unless otherwise stated on the seller's disclosure, on that like second to last page of the seller's disclosure. Often when I'm explaining to clients, like, this is the expectation. If we want anything in addition to this, we need to, pay attention to what the seller's disclosure is and note that. Okay, remember how we said that they wanted on the seller's disclosure, we're going to pretend as though it doesn't say that refrigerator is staying. If there's anything you want to stay with the property that is stating on the seller's disclosure it is not staying, here's where you're going to denote it, okay? And you would say refrigerator, I'm going to probably spell that wrong, is staying as a convenience to the seller and with no value attached. You might ask, like, why are you saying the no value attached? That's weird. That is for the lender's purpose, right? The way that that starts to be kind of crazy if it's like, okay, they're leaving a tractor and they're leaving, they're also going to not take stuff that value. An appraiser might start to back that value out of the value of the home. So they're leaving the dining room table, they're leaving those, that stuff gets, if you've got a long list of stuff they're leaving, do a personal property agreement separate from the contract. But this is where you're going to denote like a fridge is staying or a TV is staying if it's different than what's on the seller's disclosure. So if it's like a fridge, then I could buy the house tomorrow and close and then remove the fridge. That's not right, because it's risky for them. If you're including, if it's value that the buyer is willing to pay more because a fridge and 2 TVs are staying, but then the buyer can remove 2 days after they move in and then the house gets foreclosed on and those things are gone, that's risky to a seller. Like, does that make sense? Exclusions. If there's ever anything you want them to remove, like those old tires, you would exclude it here, or a swing set, seller to remove swing set, 3 days prior, no less than 3 days prior to closing.
Or cinder blocks in the attic.
Or cinder blocks in the attic. Our additional terms are going to go here. So like an example in our offer, if we had any additional terms other than those pieces, we're going to include those additional terms here.
So the additional terms is the appraisal, can the $5,000 in taxes there, or no?
We'll do a waiver. We'll do an addendum. There's a different specific waiver that you're going to use
But
for
could
that.
we put that there, or, no?
Nope.
Because you include the addendum. Okay.
Correct. So then if you're going to do a home
Oh, I
warranty,
see.
guys, is here where you're going to check the home warranty. So if you want a home warranty, you're going to check that box. Who's paying for it? You're going to check here, seller or buyer. And it's not to exceed. So if you want to put in here, for a fact that like Old Republic, for example, and for a fact that Old Republic has, and I'm not up to date on it, guys, a 485 home warranty or 550 home warranty. You're going to put 550 in here. If you're not sure, just note that it's up to that amount. And then if it ends up being a little bit more, your buyer is going to take care of that at closing. Here, you're going to put Old Republic. This is the only place, and Randy, this is being recorded. I love it. This is the only place I ever put TBD on a contract because I wanted my clients to be able to have the opportunity to review the different home warranty companies. Randy would really prefer that you just specify a warranty company here. The deductible is how much that client or that homeowner, the buyer, is going to pay whenever they have a claim. So it's to not exceed a $75 deductible. The reason they are putting that there, guys, is with these home warranties, somebody could say, oh yeah, I'll get you one up to 550. And they're going to get you one up to 550 that they're going to pay a little bit less for it because the deductible is $100 each time you come out. And so they're following the rules. And remember, this is a contract. They're following the rules. They're willing to pay up to 550, but nobody put anything in here as far as how much the deductible would be. So they had the ability to go buy that one that was $400 and had a $100 deductible. Does that make sense?
Yes, but does the seller really care about this? You have to put it in there saying that your buyer's gonna, but you're saying the buyer's gonna pay for it. So does the seller really care?
No, but no, and I oftentimes would handle it outside of the contract so it wasn't confusing and a listing agent wasn't going through fast and was like, oh, this one asked for home warranty, keep moving, kind of a thing. So there's also that option, but typically you're going to have if you're including it, the seller's paying it here, and as a list, you'll just note to see who's paying for it. Okay. Here you're going to say who's responsible for ordering it. Typically, most times you're going to check that the buyer's agent is responsible for making the arrangements. Part of that too is protect your buyer, that they're not going to go shop and get a less expensive that follows these rules, kind of a thing. But this is who's responsible. It also is going to be who is going to trigger who with the title company is going to ask for, where's that home warranty? Can you get me the invoice for the home warranty if it's selected that the buyer's agent's going to? Next, we have seller's disclosure. So you're including all of the documents that are a part of the contract. So everything you check here makes it to where it's a piece and included in one with this contract. So we're going to include seller's disclosure, lead-based paint. If we did end up doing the appraisal waiver, you're going to have appraisal waiver. as in its present condition is your as-is waiver, in its present condition, okay? Cold weather addendum, those are all, you're listing all of the different documents that then are then made and bound to this, to make it all one, okay? That's where you're gonna include it here.
And if the seller has the in its present condition, because I've seen that recently where they've already, the seller signed it and they're saying, hey, buyers.
We're not doing any
so-
repairs, yeah.
You would still mark that because you have to sign it and you have to put it as a part of your offer.
Yep. Your franchise disclosure, so you would put here, you know, if it was a Remax, or you could put seller's franchise disclosure. That's going on here, okay, guys? Because you're saying this is all a part, and that makes everybody know that they need to go find what that is and include it in the contract, okay? Yes, and makes everybody know that what is all included. Okay, here you're just disclosing if anyone is licensed, this, if you're the seller or buyer, if there's ever a time that you're selling a property that's a flip property, for example, and the seller is licensed, you're going to check that box, even though that's not your client, or if your client happens to be licensed in Kansas, Missouri, or any other state. This is where you're saying that the seller is an immediate family member, or the buyer is immediate family member of you. Okay. Or of assisting the seller, if it's like they're helping their brother sell their house. All right, so this is where we're going to put in our purchase price of $520,000. Is a little pet peeve, guys, but I think if it shows professionalism, it also makes it easier for a listing agent to read it. Use commas. Please don't be lazy. Here, you're going to say how long they have to include to get their earnest money deposited. If you don't put anything, it's 3 days. Think about what day it is. If it's over a holiday weekend, like it's how long it takes you to get the earnest from your client to the listing agent or to the title company, okay? So if it is over a holiday weekend and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't change that, and my day 3 is going to be Memorial Day, you can say, hey, where can I meet up with you to give you a check? Kind of a thing, right? It's okay if you literally are just getting it to the listing agent by that date.
Oh, really? Oh, I did not know. that.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
because you've exchanged it, right? That doesn't mean they have to get it to the title company. No, and you can take it directly to the listing agent, right? There's been times where it's like, okay. Now, is that like the nicest thing in the world to do? No. If it keeps you in contract, great. Okay, earnest money. We're gonna say here, guys, we had said in our, to stick to our plan here, that we were gonna do 5,000 in earnest. You're putting that amount here. And we're gonna say that it's a check or electronic funds transfer. And then remember, they had that nice fancy offer cover sheet, but we can always go and look to see who are we supposed to do the earnest money with by going and looking at deposit at the bottom of that MLS sheet. So secured title KC, okay, for $5,000. If there was additional earnest money that we're going to put down after inspections, we would have that here. And then you guys would call that out in your additional terms. Buyers to make additional earnest money after the completion of renegotiation, if applicable, of inspections. Does that make sense?
And earnest money check / electronic funds, that could be a cashier's check, any kind of a check, right? Okay.
Yes. Okay, from here, you're going to then put how much is financed by your client. And I wonder if there's, let me zoom out so we can, because this is kind of helpful. Oh, nope, it's not going to, it's going to say no. Okay. How are you guys doing? You holding up okay? Okay, so here we're going to do 10% down. So I'm going to get out my trusted calculator again, because it's always good to have the information be correct. So 520,000, if they're putting down 10%, that means they're financing 90%. So the number I'm going to do here is 520 times 0.9, 90%, okay? 468,000. The balance of purchase price to be paid in certified funds. So this is here where you're like, okay, Elizabeth, 520 times 10%, because you said they're putting 10% down. You would think that you would put $5,200 here, right? Is there any, does anyone understand why we wouldn't put $5,200 there or $52,000 there? Yes. So you're going to do what the down payment is minus your earnest deposit. So you're going to take the 52,000 and subtract out the 5,000. So 47,000 is going to go in this box. The way you always check your math is that these 3 numbers or 4 numbers always need to add up to what's up top here, okay? I'd hate for you guys to get this pushed back to you in compliance, and they will push it back for that because these numbers don't add up. Chris is checking my math here.
No,
It's all right. Hey, I don't blame, after last week, I don't blame you all. You're checking my math.
Math is not my strong suit, so that's, I'm trying to follow along with the math.
Okay, does everyone understand that piece? Because that is like a part that can catch people up
So
sometimes.
which ones, so we should add up the finance amount of 468 plus the 5,000 in earnest money plus the 47
Mm-hmm,
should equal the 520, right?
correct. Okay, I'm gonna stick here for just a second longer too. And let's talk about a couple other loan types, okay? One loan type that I want to, okay, one thing is if they're paying cash, guys, then we're gonna have just 3 things that are filled out, okay? We're gonna do the 520, the 5,000 earnest. I'm not gonna have anything here that financed, right? And then I'll just have 515 here, and that's what this looks like, okay? I'm gonna use my commas because I'm a professional. What if it's a VA loan, or there's some really nice doctor's loans that either 100% financed? Yep, like sometimes you've got some doctors that can go get a 100% financed loan. Oftentimes it's your VA loan. You're gonna get a VA loan and you're gonna go, how do I do this? If you're offering 520 on a VA loan and they're putting down 5,000 in earnest, no, they're gonna have 0% down payment if they'd like. So then you're gonna put here, they're financing 100%. Our financing here is gonna be 520 because they're financing the entire amount. So in your balance of certified funds, you're gonna wanna put credit of 5,000. So you would put it like that, guys, or you could put it as a negative 5,000. Does that make sense? Because then that money is coming back to them at closing. And our numbers still add up, right? Because we got to have those all add up to be that top number. So they're offering 520 to purchase the house and they're going to finance 100% of it. But we still have to put an earnest down to show good faith, right? Because we're tying up the property. No. So you're gonna, so when we make the offer, my clients with the VA loan are gonna give $5,000 check, right? And it's gonna be deposited for good faith. When it comes time to close on the property, since they're financing 100% of it, they technically would get that 5,000 back. So your contract, those numbers all have to add up properly, right? In reality, what oftentimes, and this is a time to slow down and explain it to your clients, in reality, what ends up happening, there's like a funding fee, a VA funding fee. There's closing costs. So this 5,000 may very well go towards closing costs. So they're not getting a check, you know, but you want to show them that you're getting that 5,000 is coming back to you as a credit at closing. Does that okay? Make sense? Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can.
Sorry. Okay, perfect. Can you show me and say that? Sorry, I'm having to travel and watch this. I'm actually working with the VA loan right now. Can you just show me where that is and say that one more time?
Yep.
That last
So
two
for
sentences.
example, yep. So if example, you're gonna do 520 as your purchase price. And if they're putting down 5,000 in earnest, you're gonna put that on the earnest money amount. For total amount financed, because they're financing 100%, you're gonna put 520,000 on that line. And then for balance of purchase price, you're gonna do a negative $5,000. And I'm recording this. You are more than welcome, Lisa, to go back and watch it then, or shoot me a message and I'm happy to help.
Okay, perfect. And I actually honestly have to use the MAR papers. I can't do a sales contract on our KWAP paper. So that's why there was a minute of confusion, but it's okay. I got it. I got what you said. Thanks.
Okay, but does that make sense? Because you want to have that all add up, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Guys,
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. You're very welcome, Lisa. Okay, so then if you're doing seller paid closing costs, it's under the section F. So if, for example, you've done a great job and or it's that specific, like unicorn property in which you're going to get closing costs paid, you would put 4,000 on this top line. and then 4,000 on this bottom line. Okay, but this is where you're asking for seller paid closing costs, 4,000. And a total of 4,000 in seller expenses. Guys, note this is a up to, not to exceed. If for some reason, which on a 520 property, guys, note that their closing costs are gonna be plenty high enough, but it's if for some reason it would come in and closing costs and prepaids are only gonna be $3,000, it is a use it or lose it. And so those sellers are not on the hook to pay 4,000 if there's only 3,000 worth, and you're not gonna get a reduction in the price. Your people are just out that $1,000. So note that you want to be pretty specific on that, and it's use it or lose it. And oftentimes I would tell my people, if we're asking for closing costs, I know that they said we'd be around 4,600, so I don't want to overshoot it, guys. Is it okay if we just put 4,000, and then if there needs to be another 600, are you okay covering that 600? Yes, Elizabeth. Okay, cool. Let's do that. But that's where you're asking for closing costs, if you're asking for it. If you're not asking for it, I always think it's nice and clean to put a 0 there, just so everybody's clear. Okay. This is where we're putting our closing and possession date. So we had talked before, we're gonna do March 17th. And then if we did our possession for the 19th of March at 10 a.m., this is where you would specify that. Make sense? Okay. If you have a cash sale, guys, you do need to put an amount in here. Otherwise, they're doing it within the inspection period. Okay. And this is only in regards to if it's a, and then if it's finance, it's going to be within the loan period. Okay. And again, this is not the waiver. That's a separate document when it comes to appraisal. Okay. Sale contingency. This is talking about whether it's contingent or not contingent on the sale and close of a property. So if we're going to make it clear, ours is not contingent on the sale of a property. This is cash or finance. So if it's going to be one of the two, you're selecting that radio button. If it's cash, you can skip this whole this whole next section, okay? Because it's all about financing. This is that loan approval that we talked about, okay? And it says that it needs to be within 5 calendar days. Or sorry, I'm sorry. The loan or closing date or change of any loan approval times, they must notify the seller within 5 days. Or before 15 days within closing. So you need to change that. That is if you're going to go from an FH or conventional loan to an FHA loan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
The buyer may obtain loans different from those described herein, provided that the terms of the loan do not result in additional cost to the seller, delay the closing date, or change the loan approval timeframe. Okay. So if you put conventional, because that's gonna most likely help to get you offer accepted, but then you want VA, because they're approved for both and it's in your buyer's best interest to go ahead and do
Right.
VA, you can go back to the listing agent and say, hey, we're changing to VA. It's not going to change closing date, nothing, blah, blah, blah. And we're good. We don't have to do any kind of
Correct.
paperwork. Okay.
No, sorry, say no, sorry. You do have to you do have to make a change
Okay.
too. These changes must be agreed upon in writing by both parties within 5 calendar days
Okay.
of buyer's knowledge and no later than 15 calendar days before closing. So you do have to go back and that, guys, too, in some senses, it so that, yes, like you do have to go back and get approval to change it. Because the reason being, Krista, is like, what if, like, it takes longer to get that VA loan approved, right? So then if you don't go and say, hey, we're changing it and everyone's agreeing on it, and guess what? It's closing date and all of a sudden you're going, oh, okay, well, we didn't quite get it approved yet. All the seller has to do is you are outside of contract. We're canceling the contract. We're keeping your earnest money and or going after you with litigation because you didn't perform. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why. And that's why you want to be real clear too on your contract terms. Okay, so here you're saying type of finding owner occupied or an investment loan. You're going to check one of the two of those. Your conventional loan, FHA, VA, USDA, or other for your loan type. So we're going to say we're conventional here. Fixed rate. If you've got an ARM, you could put an adjustable rate on there. Interest only, which is typically going to be whenever it is like a construction loan. 30-year note, if it's a 30-year note, or 15 if it's a 15. Here you have an option to put either principal amount or loan to value. This, whether it goes far or not, sometimes I'd be kind of sneaky or cute about it. And if I wanted to make the listing agent do the math to see that we were only 10% down, instead of saying loan to value of 90%, I was going to do my 520 times 90%. And I'm going to say principal amount on the loan is 468. I know this sounds silly, guys. There are times then agents going quickly aren't going to pay attention that I'm only 10% down and someone else is 20% down, kind of a thing. Does that make sense as to why you might take the moment to do that? Now, if I was putting down 40% or 45%, you better believe I'm going to do 90 loan to value and put down there that I've got 55% loan to value. Does that make sense? Okay, interest rate. The point of this one, typically you're going to see prevailing rate at closing. The other option that you can select is that it's not going to exceed a certain percentage. This would be if somebody were to say they got pre-approved. I mean, I don't know if you guys heard or not. We talked about it today in our team meeting. Interest rates are now at 4.25%. So if somebody were to have written an offer last week and get it accepted and they had it checked here and it looks something like this, guys, guess what? The buyer has an out now. There's a loophole because rates are above 4%. So most of the time, and that's the purpose of this, right? It's the purpose of this to say if the buyer is protected, that if interest rates go up above a certain amount, that they don't have to. Does that make sense? That's the point of this. So most of the time you're going to have it selected that it's prevailing rate at closing.
But don't they lock in with the lender and, so if they locked in with the lender, would you put the interest rate not exceeding whatever they locked in? You need to know that from the lender?
Honestly, Krista, I wouldn't. I have not ever seen anything other than the prevailing rate at closing checked, because as a buyer's agent, like we're doing our job to make sure, right, we're educating our people. But that's a loophole for a buyer to get out. And as a listing agent, if I see it checked and I'm a good listing agent and it says, so, I mean, I'm going to go, whoa. Like, I don't want your client to have a loophole.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if we've got a 90-day close and with the rates that are jumping like they're jumping, guys, because I've seen before people not understanding what that means. And they put, oh, we're locked, you know, we talked to the lender 3.75. Well, they don't realize that they've just sent over an offer that's showing that their buyer can cancel, and that might make their offer less desirable. Now, your client needs to understand if they're on the hook to close, regardless of what those interest rates do too. Does that make sense? Okay. Here we're going to say that our buyer is pre-approved. A really nice way, professional way of putting it across is to say the mortgage company and then to put the lender, especially if it's one of those local lenders, guys, that has a really good reputation. You're going to want to make sure you're calling attention to that. Here's where we're talking about loan approval. So this was the term that we said that a lot of times people are going to miss. They don't know what it means, but this is stating that your clients are going to get loan approval within 45 calendar days of the effective date, if left blank, or 5 days prior to closing. So if since we wrote a little over a 30-day close, we wouldn't have full 45 days. We're going to have 27 days to give them loan approval. Now, if we give loan approval on day 29, it doesn't mean the contract's done. We can't close, anything of that sort. All it means is if we don't give it 5 days prior to closing, there's a loophole for the seller to jump out of and for the seller to use to cancel the contract or to say we're breach of contract. Okay. And that's where a seller can get real. I mean, then it's happened, guys, where a seller can get real cute and say, oh, nope, I don't want to sell to you because guess what? Somebody called and wanted to offer 10,000 more than you're offering me. Your breach of contract, I keep your earnest money and I get to go sell to somebody else for 10,000 more. And guys, that is a really bad day. As an agent, you want to stay on top of that. With your inspection period and with the loan approval, you go under contract. My biggest suggestion to you is go add that to your calendar as a reminder so that you know that you're remembering to go check up on it. Does that make sense? Right? Yeah, and it's one of those things that can sneak up on you, especially if it's a longer close. Here we're talking about lender appraisal requirements. So again, if it's an FHA, a VA, there might be appraisal requirements. If your client's doing an FHA loan and they say, we have to do FHA, guys, and people might be doing FHA because they've got bad credit. May not be because they don't got money.
Or limited credit.
Okay, or limited credit, right? So there might be times that then you can make your FHA look more desirable by saying they'll pay up to, you know, $4,000 worth of lender requirements, kind of a thing. All it's saying here is that they're already guaranteeing that they're going to pay that much. If you leave it blank at 0, it means it'll be negotiable when you get to that point. Does that make sense? Okay. Insurance, this is going through insurance, the seller has to keep, okay, I guess utilities, seller must keep the utilities on until closing. Maintenance of the property, sellers responsible to maintain it in the current condition. If there's an insurance casualty or loss, it says that the seller is going to use that money to put towards the property. I think I often would tell some buyers too, if there is a loss on the property, the buyer does have the ability to cancel the contract. So if a major fire happens, yes, the seller can say, I'm going to use the money to fix the property, but there is an out for a buyer at that point too. Okay, survey. It's the buyer's responsibility to conduct a survey. If they'd like to do a survey, if you leave it blank, they only have 10 days to do that, which would be during that inspection period, guys. Surveyors take a little bit of time to get out there, so I would extend that if I was you. This is where we're doing our calendar days for inspection. As you can see, it's 10 days if left blank. If you're going to shorten it to 7 like we did in our terms, we're going to put 7 there.
When would you do a stake? When would a stake survey? What's a good example of why you would want that? Certain property line or?
Sometimes, I mean, it's going to be pertinent, like to your client, if they really want to put a fence up and it's not real clear where the lines are. There's been times in a neighborhood where that's been a little iffy, or if it's an acreage, or that would be when I would do a stake survey. If there's times you look at it and you're like, looks like that neighbor's retaining wall is kind of edging over, like what that would be. I mean, it's your client's decision, right? And they may say, oh no, I'm good, I don't need to do, but and that's on, and stake surveys don't get done a whole lot, but it's on your client if they want to do it. Now, are there times where people didn't do a stake survey and then 1 foot of the neighbor's fence is in their yard? Yes. As long as you've offered it and said, if you want to do a stake survey, they're about $600, I believe. That's an option you have, and we need to disclose it here. You've given your client the opportunity to say, yes, I want to do a stake survey, and they declined. So you're covered.
One is 500 and one is more than
Yeah, no, and they both, like, both of them are not super easy to get, and yet some people know they're going to put a fence in, so they want to know exactly where those fence lines are, and they're going to do it anyways. And or just if it's not real clear where the property falls. Okay, so our renegotiation, guys, we're going to put that at here at the top of page 10, and that's where we're going to put our 3 days. Otherwise, if left blank, it'll be 5. This is just stating that if the buyer defaults in the way that I had explained it, and whether this is Randy approved or not, my God. If the seller defaults, it basically says that the buyer can enforce the contract or cancel the contract with written note to the seller. And if the buyer defaults, the seller can enforce the contract, meaning hire attorneys and those kinds of things. So this is, you're signing a legal document is how I'd handle that. This is saying that if a dispute resolution, we would do mediation prior to going through attorneys. This is talking about radon. So you're just informing them about radon, that it exists, and you can't give them guidance on whether they should be testing for that or not. Lead-based paint disclosure, and that will be included if it was required. Criminal offenders. This is the one that sometimes would catch a buyer's eye and they'd be like, what? This is just saying, you got to go do your own research. I can't tell you about any of this. So here's where you can go do your own research. Thank you so much. Franchise disclosure, that although one or more of the brokers may be a member of franchise, the franchise is not responsible for the act of the broker. And then this is that broker relationship one, guys. So this is sometimes where you're going to run into questions. And again, to go back to show you in the MLS where we find that information, you're going to see here that the listing agent is a designated agent. Sometimes it'll say seller's agent here. But since it says designated agent, we're going to say designated seller's agent, and you are a designated buyer's agent. Okay. Let's go back to the example of it is a for sale by owner. That case, you're going to say it's a designated buyer's agent and the seller is unrepresented. You're like, Elizabeth, that's so weird. Why am I putting on both sides that I'm a designated buyer's agent with the for sale by owner? It's because you want to make it incredibly clear to that for sale by owner that you do not represent them. and that you're representing the buyer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, if it's the exact opposite, so it's a listing, guys, I'll just show, I mean, like, I think you guys are all very smart, so I don't need to do this, but I'm gonna do it just for fun. And here is how you're gonna fill that out. You're gonna say again, I'm a listing agent, designated seller's agent. I represent the seller. Okay, buyer. The licensee assisting the buyer is a designated seller's agent. One more time, for those in the back. I represent the seller and you, buyer, are unrepresented. So it's completely clear that you're only representing the seller.
But if you're selling something in Missouri, you could be a dual agent. How does that?
No,
work?
Randy Vanderpool will
No.
have a heart attack, and please don't do that. We need that, man. Yeah, do not do that. So no matter, you could technically, but we don't do that here. Okay. That all makes sense for how you're representing yourself. Okay. And where to go find that information? Next is compensation. We're almost done, guys. Compensation. So you'll see sometimes the seller, because the seller is paying that commission, right? Of 3% to the listing agent, 3% to the buyer's agent. Now, since the buyer is paying a flat fee, you're going to check the buyer box as well. Okay, because it's not commission, it's not source of commission, it's source of compensation. So on your offers with your buyers, you've got to check both the seller and buyer. And the way you're explaining that during the writing the contract is, guys, our commission is paid for by the seller. I'm checking the box for seller. And since you've got that $3.95 flat fee, then we're checking that you're compensating as well. Move on. Here you're gonna sign as the buyer's agent and the buyer. We'll go through that again. Earnest money, this is just talking about the delivery of it and kind of how that works, that both parties have to agree. It's held at a escrow. Both parties have to agree to release it. The way that I always explain taxes is that this is just going over taxes and prorations, and that the seller is going to, we're going to provide the seller is going to provide us a credit because we're going to be responsible for paying for the taxes at the end of the year. And so at closing, it's just going to show that they're going to prorate taxes or anything else to us so that we have all the money to pay when it's time. Okay, evidence of clear title. Our seller is responsible for providing us clear title, and so that they're going to pay for a title owner's policy to us. And then you'll have a lender's policy that you'll pay for your lender if you've got one. The expiration is going to be here on this line, guys. And so I think that we had put on our example that we were going to do 2/16 at 6 p.m. Again, you can be super cute with this, but note that 6 p.m. on the 16th can come and go and we may not hear anything, which is reality. The other thing is, if these sellers, technically, if they sign it at 6:15, it is after the offer has expired, and you'll be required to do an amendment, and you wouldn't necessarily have a solid contract. That would be a loophole that the seller could use to get out of the contract. Does that make sense? So be careful with your expiration dates, that you want to use it to force somebody's hand to say, let's make a move, we're serious, but you also don't want to be too aggressive to where there's not physically possible for someone to sign it in that time. All right, you guys remember how on that cover letter, they had the brokerage and the address and such. If you don't have a offer sheet to tell you where it is, you're going to click on here and you're going to be able to pull the name of the brokerage and copy and paste that over as such. When you want the address for it, guys, just click on that hyperlink and it's going to bring up what the street address is for that brokerage. You can copy and paste that over. Same with the name of the licensee assisting the seller. That's going to be Jeffrey here, Albright. And then with the listing contact info, you're going to want to use their cell phone. The reason we're going to pull the agent's cell phone is because that is where the appraiser is going to get, the lender's going to get the cell phone of the listing agent to give to the appraiser. Okay. And then you've got brokerage contact information, which is going to be this number that's above it. That's for the office. And then finally, the listing agent's licensee email address. So their email address. We will, so this in DocuSign, we're in the section where we're filling the contract out. We're not doing any signatures right now. Okay. But this is where you're going to sign. We'll talk about this on Thursday more, but this is where you're going to add your signature because you are the one who prepared the form. The thing I'm going to note about this box too is if you're helping a for sale by owner and you're representing a buyer, you're going to sign the form here because you prepared the form. If there's some time where you're a listing agent and buyer's agent is in Mexico and says, hey, my people came through your open house. They'd like to make an offer. Do you mind? Oh yeah, I'll write it out. This thing's been on the market for 11 days and I'm pulling my hair out. Sure, be more than happy to write it up. You're signing it here because you prepared the form. Does that make sense? Sometimes you're going to have an offer that's super sloppy because the other agent isn't the professional that you are. And you might say, can I just do a new one? Can I just do a new offer? You're going to sign it here, even if you're the listing agent. Okay. Anyone have any other questions online? I'm doing halfway decent. I didn't cough as much today, guys. I haven't been, they did the floors at my flip house, but I haven't been able to go to the flip house like that. I swear that's what it is. The dust from the flip house. I'm gonna be so excited when one of you sells that flip house. I'm just gonna be so grateful. Full price, above full price. Let's do it. Okay. And adding more documents. Because remember on our contract, we said that we wanted to have in its present condition, right? You have here where you can search on the different forms from this is that change form. So, right, if we have to go in and change the buyer agency, that's going to be that one. And then we have our other forms here. So our appraisal amendment to contract. And then if you had an escalatory addendum, we would use that too. I'm not going to go into that today though, if that's okay, just because it's a whole nother beast. And then in its present condition, so the appraisal and the escalatory ones are specific to our brokerage. You're going to find it here. Or for you KWAPers, it's going to be KW 139, right? Give me. Bye, good to see you. So we're going to go ahead and add selected here. And then I'm going to go back up to my forms again. And it's the Heartland MLS that's going to be in its present condition. Just kidding. KCRER. In its present condition. We're going to add selected. Okay, so let's go through the two of these. We'll do it in its present condition first. Is anyone feeling any calmer about having to fill out a contract when they find the right property? Okay, so we're going to put in the address again. These are where you've got your 3 different boxes, and you keep hearing people talk, and there'll be oftentimes when you're calling and asking your questions, and a listing agent will say, yes, I've already got a box 2, or I've got a box 3. This is what they're referring to, okay? So box 1 is saying that buyer is entitled to conduct inspections and that the seller will make no repairs or treatments. That means termites too, guys. So if there's termites, they're not going to do treatment there. The buyer will have the right to cancel the contract if they're not happy with the results of the inspection. And then it says that they're waiving rights to renegotiate. The second one, which is what the first box, so that's what, as everyone catch that in team meeting, Randy shared this a couple weeks back. So it used to be this box 1 was box 2. Okay, and they shifted them all up just to keep us all on our toes. So box 2 is saying your buyer is buying the property regardless. They're going to do inspections, I don't know, just so they can plan, just so they can sleep better at night, to know what they've got themselves into. But they're still waiving their rights to cancel the contract, and they're still waiving their rights to renegotiate any repairs. So that would be what box 2 is. That box 3 is they're not doing any inspections whatsoever, and they're going to move forward. And that is definitely like a serious thing to commit to. Note there are, I mean, I bought properties without doing inspections as an investor because I knew I was gutting the whole dang thing and I didn't care. But that is not something to be taken lightly. But I'll also tell you guys, not that it is good business practice, but you're going to run into it as a listing agent, and you're going to be competing with other buyers agents that are going to play the same game. They will come in here and they're going to check box 1. Oh yeah, my buyers are going to buy it no matter what, right? Or they're going to do inspection, but they know they're not going to get to ask for any repairs, right? And then they do an inspection and the sewer line's crap. And they know that it's going to be a $9,000 repair for the sewer line. They may very well go back and say, yeah, I know my people said they weren't going to ask for anything, but we'd be willing to continue in the contract if you did the $9,000 sewer. That stuff does happen, and there are people that play that game. Is it good for your reputation? No. Are there situations where it makes sense, where your clients are going, we don't give a dang about the other 67 pages of the inspection report and the leaky faucet and all these other things, But a 9,000, yeah, like we are gonna move on. We can't take on $9,000 sewer inspection. That's, we're gonna move on. That is a time as a buyer's agent, you can go back and say, guys, this is where we're at. Like they are cool, except for this one thing that any buyer is gonna care about, kind of a thing. Now,
don't they
write
need
it
to
with the thought that
disclose
you're
that?
not going to, and with your client not doing that, but note that that is an option if you ever get to that bridge and you need to cross it.
So if you back out now, don't they need to?
Yes.
But if they don't know that, let's say you're selling an investment property. Well, I know, but I mean.
She's
after
saying
you-
like, if we were to say, okay, we said we would, we're doing, we box one. And now there's this $9,000 sewer issue, that's where
Right.
you're gonna go to the listing agent and say, hey, they'd be cool, but the $9,000 thing, and so if you're willing to work with us, we'll keep moving forward. And you're gonna have to disclose this to any buyer, and any buyer is maybe gonna care about the night. So you're trying, I mean, that's just negotiating. That's you trying to do a dance with a listing agent and say, keep working with us, because anybody's gonna care about that. Now, is there a buyer standing behind you that's gonna say, we'll give you exactly what they gave you and not worry about the 9,000, you know what I mean? There's a chance. But note that stuff, and people are checking box one and then still trying to go back and negotiate. And as a listing agent, it's gonna drive you nuts, but you're gonna get some of that sometimes too. Okay, and then there's just a signing date at the bottom. Any other questions on this particular form? All right, we're gonna make it, guys. We've got 7 minutes. You're doing great.
We didn't do anything good.
Yeah,
You're doing great. Tuesdays are my favorite day. I think I told you guys that before. I think you guys are aware. Everyone in my world is aware that Tuesdays are my favorite day of the week. And when people forget, like my boy's dad sometimes will forget, and I'm like, it's been that long, like Tuesdays are my worst day. Why are you sending me 16 million questions? Okay, this is the appraisal addendum. This is saying that if the appraisal is equal or greater to the purchase price and agree in this, the contract will continue to move forward. If the appraisal is less than the purchase price, then the buyer agrees to pay seller, except without renegotiating the difference between the purchase price and the appraised value, not to exceed $5,000. If it's a $5,000, does that make sense?
Yes, and again, just to make sure I understand, if the purchase price is 520, but it comes in at 500, now we're on the hook for 505.
Correct. Yes. Now, each one of these appraisal waivers, and I would read through it, make sure you're completely comfortable with all of it. Each one of them are different. Some companies will have one. So if you're a listing agent, read through the appraisal waiver. They're different. Like, see how we wrote our own? Other companies wrote their own. Other companies, it gets real super confusing, because if this one is listed, let's say, for example, different one, because we're writing it for less, but if it just hit the market and we say, okay, it's 525, just came on the market, we're going to offer you 550. Other people's appraisal waivers will say, yes, they're going to make up that difference of 25,000. But if you read it closely, it'll say if it doesn't appraise for list price, then that changes. Then they're not going to pay the difference, right? So it's got to appraise at least for list price. Otherwise, they're not paying that 25. Does that make sense? So if it came in, it was listed at 525 and it came in at 500, then they're going to just pay the 25 difference on the 500. They're not going to make up the full amount. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Oh, I want to share one more thing. We have 5 minutes. This is perfect. And I even went and dug it out for y'all. Okay. Another thing that I would highly recommend you do, because it's going to help you get, just kidding. That wasn't the one. Now you're going to see, here we go. Okay. I would recommend that you send over a summary of your offer with your offer. So just like we had all of our terms in that little spreadsheet, right? We want to send over what those are. So we're going to put down, and especially when there's things that are like going to set us apart and make us so much better than everybody else. So you're going to say purchase price, seller pay closing costs, 0. Your earnest deposit, if you want to highlight that you're putting down a large earnest deposit. But sending over those terms that kind of make you stand out from everybody else and makes it easier on a listing agent, especially if they're not the professional that you are, is to your benefit. When you are countering back and forth, guys, taking the time to slow down and craft an email like this with the details of your counter, so it makes it really easy for the listing agent to just click forward and send over to their client. Note that that can work in your favor. You're doing their job for them, but you can craft that in a way to where it is to your benefit, and the seller is more likely to say, oh yeah, let's move forward with that. One of the tricks that when going back and forth and countering too, that another really great agent has shared is if you're countering back and forth, and again, this is not on every property. It's on those unicorn properties that don't sell immediately. And I get that, right? A lot of us right now are competing. But let's say that we hadn't agreed on purchase price and we hadn't agreed on closing date, but everything else we agreed on. They would put a check next to it, or they would, in front of purchase price, they would say, they wouldn't put anything. They earnest deposit, agreed, earnest deposit 2,000, agreed, made within 5 days, agreed, down payment, agreed, conventional loan, agreed, inspection period, right? Agreed, home warranty. And that way the seller is seeing agreed, 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 agreed. Oh, I only have to agree to these 2 things, and mentally it gets into more of an agreeing place. Does that make sense? The other thing I would highly recommend, and I did it all the time on a piece of paper, when you are countering, you are often countering back and forth verbally. Slow down, take a note. Even if you're verbally, I don't care if it's on the back of a receipt in your car, write down what you verbally are countering back with them, or what they're verbally countering to you, and say, hey, is it okay that I send this back over to you in an email? I just want to make sure, or I'm going to shoot, just so you know, I'm going to shoot you a text with what we're countering back and forth with. Again, you're not always working with the professional that you are. And sometimes others are countering late at night when they're tired and they've worked a long day. Some people are countering you when they've been out with friends. We'll leave it at that. Okay. The thing too is sometimes someone's going to counter you and say, well, what if I could get my people to 232? Would we have a deal? And you're like, so are you countering at 232? Like, and you think, okay, yeah, like, well, then they want to come back later and say, no, no, no. I said, what if I got my people to 232 then? And you're now gone and told your people, you got the house, yay. And really, the listing agent's going, I just know we're, you know, so it's like a clarity thing, right? Just to confirm, these are the this is the counter items. When you're sending over your summary, guys, I would highlight the things that set you apart, that make you, that's a positive, right? We're going to point those things out, and we're going to probably not bring a lot of attention to things that are not. But this makes a big difference. Always attach it as a PDF so people can read it, and text or call and follow up that they got your information. This is what I set to a seller. So I do the same thing with my sellers to my clients too, but it was like the quickest I could find. Look how, when it's from, guys, 2019. My gosh. All right. Any other questions there? No? Yeah, exciting, fun. Everyone's like, yay. I know it's super scary to write offers, and yet it's not that bad once you figure out what to put in the blanks, and like there's a rhyme and a reason to it.
It's all very legal, and it is scary when you're doing it and you don't really know what you're doing yet.
Yeah.
You should be doing it all by yourself and not sure if you did it right, you know?
Yes, and yeah, you'll get, it gets better, but yes, like double checking and having, that's why we're here, is to like double check and make sure that it's got it. Okay, excellent, guys. Well, thank you. I'm gonna stop recording.